Down the right field line, pretty well hit. LaVarn way is the right way here tonight.
Yogi Berra said it's 90% mental, the other half is physical. My name is Ryan Lavarnway, Major League catcher and minor league grinder, and I've spent the last 15 years playing professional baseball while evolving my mindset. I'm fascinated by optimizing that 90%. In this show, I'll talk to elite athletes and mindset coaches about what makes them tick and how they've overcome obstacles in their own careers on the way to finding success. This is Finding the Way.
Hey everyone, welcome to Finding the Way. I am Ryan Lavarnway, and today I am joined by Kate Good. Kate is a former world-class athlete turned mental performance coach. As an athlete, she earned national titles as an ice dancer in both Canada and Denmark and competed in 4 world figure skating championships. As a mental performance coach, she employs the principles and techniques used by the world's top athletes to control the negative, learn to trust themselves more, and make astonishing comebacks and deliver unshakable, consistent performance. Kate Good, thank you so much for joining me.
Hey, Ryan. Thanks so much. Thrilled to be here.
So I don't know anything about ice dancing, ice skating, figure skating. I grew up in Southern California, and I think my only experience on the ice was at like people's birthday parties where you skate in a circle for an hour and eat pizza. How did you get involved? I know you're from Canada, so there's a lot more ice. But how did you decide, and when did you decide you were going to be a competitive figure skater?
Yeah, it's a wonderful world. There's a lot ingrained in this, but how did I get involved? My parents kind of put us in every sport. So I'm from a family of 4 girls. My dad was a very, very good hockey player, and he wanted us all to ultimately be hockey players. But I won my first competition in a pretty dress and was like, sorry, Dad, that's not going to happen. And so I started at age 3.
Wow.
I played softball, I did volleyball, I did track and field, but I really found a deep love for the ice, and just there was something about it that really clicked for me. And ultimately, that's the one I ran with. I was never like that athlete that everyone was like, that's going to be the one that makes it. I was the like chunky little untalented girl, but I had a lot of heart and a lot of will, and I worked harder than anyone else. So ultimately, that's I think what helped me get to where I did, and but yeah, that's how I started.
There's so much. I mean, right away, as soon as you open your mouth, you're brilliant. I love this out of you. First of all, the pretty dress. Did the pretty dress play a big part in it for real?
I think so. I think I really like to like twirl. I was like, yeah, I can do this.
Okay.
But beyond that, I think it was really the that feeling on the ice more than anything, and there was just something about it that made me feel so at home.
Oh my God. Well, I have a little girl at home. We were at daddy daughter ballet class last night, and she has daddy got her dressed last night, so she was in her jeans and a hoodie, but a tutu over it. So who knows if she's falling in love with dance right now or not. But you also talk about how unexpected your success was. You were you said like what did you say? The chunky little kid, as was I. You know, it's cute and healthy when kids have a little extra sturdiness is what I like to call it. But the heart and the will to succeed. That's what this podcast is all about, right? You know, not everybody is the 5-star prospect. Not everybody is just destined for greatness right away in everybody's eyes. What was it? What is that heart? What is that will? Can we try to define it or bottle it, or what did it feel like to you? How did you maintain it?
I think a lot of that like determination is quite innate. I think you have it or you don't, and you just really want something. At least for me, I think that's really what it was. I had an incredible support system around me as well that instilled a lot of belief. As a family, we were really focused on the language that we used with ourselves, and really making sure that that was a place where we could learn to use language. And even to this day, I think that a lot of people say, show me your friends and I'll show you your future. And I actually think that's wrong. I think it's show me what you watch, you read, you listen to, what you say out loud, and that'll show you your future. Because I think we had to curate what we put in our minds, and ultimately, as we do our bodies, I think people today are so concerned with what their food contains, the glucose content, is it sustainably sourced? But we let our minds be flooded with like news and addictive YouTube channels and all these things. And ultimately, I think that what you're what you consume becomes your thoughts, and your thoughts become your words. And if they're negative, then ultimately they will make you sick and not let you achieve your potential. And so in my household, we were really focused on what we watched, what we listened to, the words we used with each other, and ultimately, the most important, what we used with ourselves and out loud. So that was a big piece, I think, that helped contribute to my own belief in myself is language. Um, and I don't know where my mom learned that, but it was just something that was important for us growing up.
Yeah, I see the book It Takes What It Takes and Getting the Neutral
Yeah.
both in your background. Two of my favorite mental skills books. But I love what you're saying, that what you consume will become your thoughts. What you think will become your words. Let's take that further. Your words become actions. Your actions become identity. Like, the cycle, basically, it starts with what are you taking in? And like you said, everyone is concerned about the food these days, but I don't think enough people are concerned about who you're surrounding yourself with, what language are they using, what you allow yourself to embody in their emotion, their spirit, their outlook. What are you taking in? When I coach leadership through Spark Brilliance, there's a concept that we use called emotional contagion. And the science says
So
that,
interesting.
the idea is that you can spread your outlook and emotion like a virus, right? It's contagious.
Totally.
And people have heard this before, but the research shows that if you allow someone's emotion to overtake who you are, for even 2 minutes, that it can last for up to 7 hours.
Wow. I think I've heard as well now, there's studies showing that by actually being beside someone, like the stress hormones that they secrete into the environment actually rubs off on the person you're with. So if that person beside you, and this is one of the reasons why if you work with other women, your menstrual cycles sync because of the hormones it secretes. So I definitely think that that's something that's influencing us, and being really selective about those that you surround yourself with, um, and the content that you surround yourself with as well.
It's interesting. I joke that my wife and her sister have like Bluetooth linked up. And I know Jamie listens to this podcast, so I hope this isn't too personal, but when we were first dating, she said that she would play a game while we were asleep. And the idea is that when you're sleeping next to someone, your breathing rhythm starts to sync, right? And maybe even your heart rate starts to sync. So if I was sleeping peacefully, she'd try to mess with me and like snuggle
breathing.
and start breathing faster to see if it like caused me a nightmare or something. But I think what you're saying is totally right, that just being in someone's presence, even if you're not talking or communicating, you can feel their energy and their aura. So good on your parents for raising your family with intent and such positivity. I want to get into, oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say that I think that beyond that, like belief in oneself, you really need to, how do I, one of the like small tactics we used as well was to write things down. And I don't know if that's something you've ever used in your career, but it was something that my mom always had us write. And we didn't do a lot of goal planning. And I know goal planning is a big thing right now. It's like plan your goals in your year and go back to them. But we did it a little bit differently, where we would write down one goal at the beginning of the year on a piece of paper and put it in our wallet. And then you never look at it. You know, it's there, it's in your like universe, peripheral, subconscious. But it was something that we didn't really look to achieve. So it wasn't like I was driving, and I had the goal post on my looking at it every day. But for me, it was more subconscious. And I think that that was something that really took the pressure away if you weren't constantly looking how far you were. But I was able to then more look at how far have I come from where I started this. And I think that looking at it, I think there's a book called The Gap and the Gain. I don't know if you've heard of that one.
Yeah, of course.
But it's kind of that principle where instead of looking to where and how far you have to go, it's really looking at how far you've come and focusing really on that process and the progress you've made versus how far you are. So I actually kind of don't know if I believe in goal setting as much as all the others do. I believe in setting that goal a little further out and putting it in your pocket.
That's interesting. Yeah, well, it's the same concept as you plant a seed and then you don't see it until it breaks the surface, right?
Yeah, I love that metaphor. Yeah.
In the past, I've done vision boards, and I've hung them up on the wall, and you see your goals. But I think there's a hedonism in as being a human being that you get used to things. So if you see it every day, you stop noticing it, right? Like
Mm,
we can, as human
yeah.
beings, we can adapt to any environment and get used to anything. That's how people survive in the worst of circumstances. And that's how you see some of the wealthiest people in America or in the world be so unhappy, because you get used to your
Mm,
immediate surroundings. So I think there's something definitely
mm,
powerful in making a goal. Like you said, you can set it aside. Some of the times that I've done vision boards, I've ended up moving. Right, you see all the baseball helmets behind me on my screen.
yeah.
I moved 56 times in 12 years. But the power
Wow.
of the setting the goal in the way that you're mentioning is that I've created a vision board multiple times where I then lose track of it,
Mm,
and when I then find it again months later or years later, it's shocking to see how 80% of the vision board came true or came to fruition, or I
mm,
achieved those goals
right?
even without seeing it every day. So I don't know that I buy you don't believe in goal setting. You just do it differently.
Differently.
Yeah, but it's
Yeah,
very
that's true.
powerful still. Uh,
Yeah.
there's one thing as a nice dancer, figure skater. What do you prefer?
Right. Ice dancer, yeah.
Ice dancer. There's one thing that I have a hard time wrapping my mind around, and it's this that's the one part of baseball that I dislike the most. It's the
Hmm.
objectivity, or the
Oh.
subjectivity, the subjectivity.
Mm-hmm.
So to me,
The judge sport.
I want a strike to be a strike and a ball to be a ball. But ultimately, it's the umpire's decision. So it's only a
Right.
strike or a ball based on what that guy says. For you, you could go out and land all your jumps, hit all your moves, uh, dance perfectly in timing with the music and your partner. And a judge could be having a bad day or not like the color of your dress.
Mm,
How do you deal with the subjectivity of your sport?
hmm. Great question. I think it is the nature of the sport. And so I think it's one of the things, if you focus on the uncontrollables, you get lost in those. And so I think you have to know walking into the sport that it is just a part of it and it will always be there. And so learning to know that you have to focus on yourself and your performance and be what I call undeniably good, that kind of negates that piece. And there is only so much you can do on that day. And it is just being the best that you can in that moment, and with each moment, because I think each is different. And so I think that ultimately, how do you deal with it? You just know that it is part of the game.
Yeah, I love what you just said. Be undeniably good.
Mm,
Man, that landed with me. I made a T-shirt one day because I went the unconventional route. I said, "Be
mm.
so good they can't ignore you." It's the same idea,
Oh,
but how to dig a little deeper into be undeniably good and what that means to
mm,
you.
sure. It came from a coach of mine, actually. So my route is actually quite unconventional as well. So I started in synchronized skating, actually, which is you have 20 girls on a team, 16 girls on the ice. And ultimately, it's really where I became a very, very strong skater. I kind of was a late bloomer in that sense when we moved to Montreal from Toronto. And so when we went to our first World Championships and I saw the Les Suprêmes on the wall being raised with the flag. And I was like, I think I want my name up there. And so a lot of girls stick in synchronized skating, but there's no Olympic sport for synchronized skating. And for me, that was always my goal, was to qualify and go to the Olympic Games. And so when that became true, I knew that I had to pivot instead of just continuing to push on in that route, and really focus on, okay, if this is my goal, what are the changes that I need to make in my behaviors to get me there? And I knew that I was a very, very strong skater. And so ice dance was the path that I wanted to take. And so when I started ice dance, again, you have to kind of restart from the beginning. It is a very different sport from synchronized skating, and you have to find a partner, and that's a whole other story, which we can go into if you want. But ultimately, ice dance for me, it when I got to that place, and to be undeniably good, I started skating for a smaller country. So in the world of figure skating, Denmark is a very small country, and we were the first of the entire history of the country to ever make it to World Championships. And so what it meant to me to be undeniably good is one day we were at a competition in Germany, and we had been standing just around the corner, and we'd just finished our performance. We had really skated well, hit all of our technical scores, and really felt very strongly by how we performed. But we hadn't placed that well. and we were a bit confused because we knew that some of the teams that had placed higher than us had very glaring mistakes, like falling on a lift or just something very clear that there was a mistake that happened. And so we were standing around this corner and we overheard this judge talking to her athletes, being like, "Hey, did you like what I did with the Danish team?" And we were like, "What?" And the skaters were like, "Yeah, how do like we placed higher than them, but they were clearly better." And she's like, "Well, do you want to go to the Olympics or not?" And so we're around the corner. If you can imagine this like a scene, we're just
Oh my
like,
God.
what did we just hear? Like our entire the reality of our situation just became very clear that we are skating for a country that did not have a judge, and ultimately we were almost a pawn in this game of politics. And so we went back to our coach all young and infuriated, and his statement back to us was, "Well, then you need to be undeniably better." And so instead of it being this what could like we could have easily fallen into that victim mode. We could have easily used it as an excuse to place low. But instead it became this fire. And we are like, you know what? He's so right. If we are working against this, if we are working against this subjectivity, how do we just be so undeniably good that our performance cannot be denied? And so I think you have a choice to use those situations as fuel, or you use them as a reason to freeze. And so ultimately, we chose the fuel.
Oh my God. So you lived what you would imagine would have been your competitive nightmare of just
Yeah.
being totally out of control, but then you flip the script.
Mm,
And when you were telling that story, I heard three really key points that I hear over and over again in success stories.
mm,
You decided you needed to change your behavior to
mm,
embody what would help you get your goals, right? It wasn't just
mm,
what you were doing, but you embodied the new success story, the new goals that you had. And then you went and you seeked out unique opportunities, something that no one had tried before. No one had been from Denmark or to Denmark. And you had a unique opportunity, as I did, to become an Olympian, right? I was not an
mm,
Olympian for the country I was born and raised in. I had the
mm,
ability to get citizenship somewhere else. So I pursued
mm,
that unique opportunity, and as did you. And I
mm,
think as people are pursuing their goals, the more you pursue it, the more you think about it, the more you might see a previously unseen route to get there.
mm.
And then,
I think the other, oh, sorry, go ahead.
no, please.
I was going to say the other piece, I think ultimately when I reflect back at this at that time, like I think that when you are in a high performance environment, it means that you need to have low tolerance. And
Mm,
what I mean by that is that you have to be very clear about the things that you are tolerating. And that's why I actually believe that excellence, which is more what I strive to achieve in all of areas of my life, is not just getting to a place of high performance, but true excellence and consistent excellence. And that's really what I try to teach the athletes that I work with is it's actually about zero tolerance. And so creating an environment and deciding what you are no longer going to tolerate. And so is that negative thinking? Is that gossip? Is that um, letting politics of a sport dictate where you're going to go or how you're going to feel about your performance? And so I think that now that I reflect back, I really think that what I try to teach is that really trying to figure out what and ask yourself, what are you tolerating today
mm.
that's inhibiting you from getting to where you are? And ultimately, that excellence really means zero tolerance for those things.
Oh my. Oh, that's hitting me so hard right now.
Mm,
That's exactly what the third point that I picked out of your performance story was: extreme ownership. Extreme
mm,
ownership in I will be undeniably good, and that's the perfect transition to taking this to what you coach in your athletes now that you've made the
mm,
transition. You had a serious injury at 20 or 21 years old, had to retire from
yeah.
competitive ice dancing, and you've
Mm-hmm.
become a mental performance coach. The line you just said, I'm gonna write on my wall. When you're in a when you're in a high performance environment, you need to have low tolerance or zero tolerance.
Mm-hmm.
Please give me more on this. This is brilliant.
I think there's a few pieces to it. So I think one is really looking at your environment. It kind of goes back to what we talked about at the beginning of the call, which is who is in your space. What are you reading? What are you watching? What are you listening to? All those things you control. And are you tolerating what are you tolerating from those people around you? Is it that they come into the locker room or the dressing room or even the office and you're listening to people gossip or talking negatively? Are those things that you're taking a stance on um, that don't allow you to operate at the highest level? I think so. Environment is one piece of those. I think also just looking at yourself, really taking a hard look at yourself too, and knowing that, okay, so I'll give you an example of one of the teams that I work with. They had a very serious injury, life-threatening injury, and they really wanted to make it back to World Championships in a very short period of time after a traumatic fall. And so we took a look at their entire environment and not just, okay, these are the physio that you need to do, this is the rehab that you need to do, but what if we look at the athletes that are on the podium, what are they doing that's different? They have super tight nutrition and they have super strong mental skills. And yes, all the other things are fundamentals that you need to do. And you are working and operating now on top of a very severe injury that you're going to be up against. And so I think when you take a look first at like yourself, what are the things that I'm not doing today that I need to shift, and kind of like the point that you mentioned around what are the behaviors that I need to do that I'm not doing today, that I'm tolerating myself, is that I'm letting myself watch TV too late. Maybe I'm hitting snooze too many times. Like, what are the things in my world that I'm tolerating of myself? So taking a really hard look at yourself and being really brutally honest. And I think that ultimately, neutral thinking, or like as Trevor Moawad talks about, or really going to the truth, is that just being honest with yourself, and then deciding what are the shifts that we need to make. And so ultimately, the nutrition was not on point, really not fueling your body. And the second piece that they really needed to work on was really being focused on what the goal was. And so once you really go back to what do we actually want to do here, and it's to get to World Championships. Okay, I can't go out with my friends anymore because I had this very severe brain injury, and so therefore I need to stay home. I need to not be a part of those events when I'm seeing everybody go out because my brain cannot take that right now. And so if I want to make it to World Championships in 5 months, I need to be focused on myself and my environment, no matter how much I want to go to the party, or not even to the party, but just out on a walk, right?
Yeah.
And so I think it's about taking a hard look, shifting the behaviors, and then ultimately being able to adapt and pivot once you start seeing those results, those come in. I think that's how I would articulate that.
Yeah. So what you're saying reminds me exactly of a Nick Saban quote. Nick Saban being one of the most successful college football coaches. He says the fact of the matter is that if you want to be good, you really don't have a lot of choices.
Ah, the illusion of choice.
The illusion of choice, right? It comes down to do the right thing or don't. Be successful or don't. Yep. I'd love to challenge not even just you, but challenge this whole concept for 1 second. Sure. As much as I agree with it 99% of the time, I also recognize that in my own career, I didn't always eat the best nutrition. I didn't always avoid having a few beers to blow off steam. I didn't always avoid the chocolate chip cookie at night when I struck out 3 times. There's something to be said for the psychological health that can come with food or blowing off steam or taking your focus off of the goal for a limited period of time so that you can then refocus even harder because we're human beings, right? As humans, like the best baseball players do not always have 6-pack abs. And the bodies at Olympic Village were very obvious in that regard. But what would you say to someone that's listening, right? Because I believe stick to your goals, do the right things almost all the time, but we are people. And we do need some reprieve. What would you say to that?
I do think it's a great point, and I totally agree with it. Like, I eat dark chocolate every single night because that's the one thing that I love. But I think so I have 2 pieces of that. One, I think that there are seasons in life. And I think that there are periods of time where you really need to be dialed in and be willing to do the hard, boring work. And when you dial into that, you have to make that choice. Like, that is the choice. And that is really what you need to do. And there will be times. And then there's other times, like you said, that like you do need that kind of like mental, like I did a bodybuilding competition, so we would have called it like a cheat meal. You need that to just actually reset, and that gives your body the boost of carbs, or the boost that it needs actually to then reset and recalibrate to the quote unquote diet, if you want to continue that analogy. And so I think that there is a lot of value in that, and I think that one of the things that we talk about with our athletes um, is the 24-hour rule. And so whether you win or lose, and it's really for both, you have 24 hours to celebrate that win, in whatever way celebration means for you. And if that's having your chocolate chip cookie, if it's having your binging on Netflix, if it's whatever, maybe you want champagne. Also, I love champagne and it's so fun to celebrate with. So you could use that as your 24 hours, give yourself that time window to celebrate that win, or if it's the opposite, feel really crappy. Sorry, I don't know why I swear, so I almost said it, but crappy about that loss and feeling like bad and like down and like, oh man, that sucked. But then after that 24-hour period is over, it's time to get back to work and re-get back on that train to go and focus. So I think there's two pieces. I think one, there's seasons that you actually need to do the hard stuff and use your will to get through that. And two, I think that then using the 24-hour rule is really helpful, whether you win or lose, to give yourself that reprieve that you need to reset and reignite that fire that was there.
Yeah, one of my guests on season 2 of this podcast, Alex Auerbach, he said it in a really, really, one of the best ways I've ever heard it was, you need intentional rest. And he used the example because he's a mental skills coach in the NBA, that when his players are on timeout, he puts a towel over their head. Close your eyes. Like, get rid of some of the sensory input and really rest intentionally and really rest hard for that brief amount of time so that you can then go back into there. I love the way you said that too. I'd love to dig a little bit deeper into your coaching business now. When you're working with clients, is there one or two specific problems that your people that you're working with are seeing on a regular basis, or is there one or two particular solutions that you help them overcome those problems?
Good question. I think a lot of what we do as mental performance coaches is actually on the emotional state, or like within the emotions. And so I think a lot of the time, I'm very clear with, like, I'm not a psychologist. And if there are things that we get into that go beyond that line, then I'm going to refer you to someone, because that's not my domain. But I think a lot of it is really starting to get underneath the pieces. So something that I like to go through with the athletes is what's called an incompletion exercise. And I'll give you a story of what an incompletion is in my life, and how it can be an incredible inhibitor of performance, actually. And so this was back in 2018, and I was just incredibly unhappy with my relationship and my work. And so I went to the gym like I did every day, and I'm setting up for a set of deadlifts. I put my 10 pounds on each side for a warm-up rep, lock in, ready to go, pull my first rep, and I hear this like pop in my back, and I'm like, oh my God. And I literally fall to the floor, cannot move. And as I'm lying there, I'm like, oh my God, what just happened? This is not good at all. And so I had to have a trainer literally like put me in my car, called a friend who lived nearby to drive my car home. And what I realized later, after x-rays and all those things, is I had fractured my end plate. It's just essentially like a small fracture in your back. And so after a lot of reflection and a lot of physio and a lot of time and tears later, what I realized is that I was operating on top of what I would articulate as an incompletion. And so an incompletion is it's a conversation that you need to have that you haven't. It's something that you just are not complete on to the fullest that it can be in that moment. So this is not a to-do list, but it's really just things that you know that you need to have done but haven't. And when you start to create on top of incompletions, what happens is they usually come back to bite you in the butt in some way, form, or another. And so I tell the story for two reasons. One is that one, you are operating on top of these types of incompletions. And usually, as athletes, they come around as injury in some way. And usually, where that injury happens is indicative of what the thing that you're avoiding is. And
Interesting.
two is that once you are able to clear them, you're really going to start to see Providence move as well. And you start to get this large sense of clarity that helps really increase the velocity of what you're doing. And so with the athletes, it's really trying to understand where are you incomplete? And so this is an exercise that you can do at the end of a competition. It could be at the end of a year. You can do it every day if you really want to. But ultimately it's understanding. And in my case, it was I decided to leave my fiance of 5 years, and then I left my job in the same week. So I unraveled my entire life
Wow.
because I knew that these were two things that were really incomplete for me and that I'd needed to do for a long time. I just hadn't had the courage to have those conversations. And then once I did, um, a very short time after, I met the man who is now the father of my two children. And now I'm sitting here in front of you today and doing the work that I love and helping other people really unlock the power of their minds and ultimately trust themselves more. And so that's really one of the things that comes up a lot is what are you operating on top of?
So let me just d- make sure I understand your concept of an incompletion.
Hmm.
It's something that you know in your bones, something that you know deep inside you is missing. It's like the
Hmm.
foundation of your house. You need it, and it's not there.
Exactly.
And
Hmm.
and because you're
Or you need to
trying,
do.
or that you need to do, or a conversation you need to
Hmm.
have, but it's not the peripheral BS. It's something that is
Right.
essential to your core being or to your core well being. And because
Right.
of that, you're gonna have whatever down the line the weakest link in the chain is gonna break.
Right. And it can actually be small, right? It doesn't have to be this massive breaking up with your fiance type of conversation, but it could be something small. Like you know that, let's say that you've over the season of your life decided that you were really going to get back in shape and you've lost a lot of weight, or that you've gotten more in shape and you're where you want, and your closet is still full with all the clothes that don't fit you anymore.
Hmm.
And so every day you're walking by this closet, oh, I really need to do this, oh, I really need to do that, and it just goes and goes and goes, and you have this piece of that's leaking energy out of
Hmm.
you. And I think it's really making sure that you're trying to like clear up those energy leaks, and ultimately complete those things that need to be done. So it doesn't have to be something so dramatic. Usually, they are conversations that you need to have with people on some level, or maybe with yourself as well. But ultimately, they could be just things that you are slowly leaking your energy. Other ones I've seen is finances. That's the one that comes up a lot. Is not understanding how to make sure that you're operating in a world where you are within your means, especially as athletes and amateur athletes that aren't making any money. How do you make sure that you're preparing now for the future when you retire? Because if you don't necessarily compete in a sport that is as quote unquote fruitful, if you will, as baseball or football or golf, tennis, right? Like figure skating, we're not making millions of dollars a year figure skating, right? And maybe there's a few who have huge sponsorship deals, but that's very rare. And so I think it's also thinking through like, how do you make sure you are doing things today that can set you up for financial freedom in the future? So thinking beyond just being an athlete, and that's one that comes out a lot that I see.
Yeah, there was a LinkedIn post this morning by a friend of mine that
Mm.
has me really connecting these dots that you're making right now. And there was the post was about a Nobel Prize winning social scientist that understood that change happens at the periphery. So if you want to
Mm.
change your life, go clean out your closet. Or if you want to
Mm.
change your life, go clean out your garage, because systems organize
Mm.
on the periphery. And if you change one thing, you'll end up changing everything. And this won a Nobel Prize. That's pretty
Wow.
spectacular. And that's what I hear you describing is make sure you take care of the little things. It's the same concept as
Mm.
that. I forget. It was a military general that said,
Mm.
if you want to be a success, make your bed.
Oh yeah. I don't know where that originally comes from. Do you make your bed every day?
No, No, but every time I see that it's not made, I think to myself, I should really make my bed.
I tried to instill it in my 9-year-old. It's not happening.
So
yet.
you know what? Maybe the next time that I want to make a major life change, I'll start making my bed more.
I always make sure. This is such a, I don't think I've ever told anyone this. Whenever I have like an important meeting or like today as an example, I always make sure that it's made.
I used to shave before games, and I had in college I started doing this because that's when I started growing facial hair, and my road roommate on the baseball team would say, "I can't believe that you're shaving before the game. What if you cut yourself?" You know, he was worried about minimizing the amount of things that can go wrong.
Interesting.
And I was starting to pile up the things that were going right. And I think that's such a minor.
Did it become a ritual for you?
It's such a minor distinction in the way that you look at the same activity, right? And it did become a ritual. In baseball, there's a term, look good, play good, get paid good. And it all starts with.
I love that.
Yeah, well, it goes on and it gets less appropriate with things that rhyme with get paid good. But to me, it's you start stacking up small wins, or you start noticing things that could potentially be small losses. So I tend to go on the positive side. Kate Good, you have been an incredible guest. Thank you so much for sharing. I'm lit up with excitement, enthusiasm, motivation right now. Before I let you go, I always ask every guest at the end of the episode, if there's one piece of advice that you could give to a younger version of yourself or someone just like you, what would it be?
Trust your body. I think that ultimately, our bodies are these incredible sources of power and wisdom. And I think that in many cases, they know what to do, and it is our minds that get in the way. And I think that when I've done that and really just truly believed in my body and its ability, and this goes for when I was sport, this goes for when I gave birth, really, truly letting my body, just trusting it and letting it know that I trust it. This is a very weird practice, but it is something that I do with my athletes and that I've done myself, is actually when you have a big moment coming up or a trauma is going to happen, as in giving birth, I actually write a letter to my body and telling it what is going to happen. And I've found that it's a very, I don't know the right word actually to articulate it. It's something that it feels weird when you start. You're like, all right, here we go, writing a letter to my body. But then there's something so powerful in it, and just really, truly trusting it and letting it know that you do trust it. That's what I would say.
Amazing. Kate, thank you so much for joining me today, for sharing your knowledge, your experience, your wisdom. Thank you at home for listening. This has been Finding the Way. I'm Ryan Lavarnway. This has been Kate Good, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks for listening to Finding the Way with Ryan Lavarnway. Find previous episodes on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts.